Hello everyone. Viewers often ask us why they need pimples. In a nutshell, for the same reason smooth coatings are needed, only the opposite. But in general, everything is much more complicated and interesting. Once upon a time, in the 30th Kingdom, when I first came to the tennis court, I was beaten at the tournament and sent to cry. I played poorly, and another person noticed my racket and said that it was slippery and of terrible quality. It was an Atemi racket from Sports Goods. It was 4 months old. I played with it on the street. After that, I bought myself a assembled racket, and of course, it played great and gave me a sharp improvement in results. I learned to play with 2 smooth coatings, went to tournaments, and I did okay. I could be satisfied. But for some inexplicable reason, about 10 months later, all this bored me so much that I even thought about quitting tennis. Topspins, counter drives, topspins, counter drives, the same rhythm of the game. All this accumulated boredom and disappointment for me. And then I had the opportunity to try a racket with long pimples. These were Inher Neptune 0.7mm pimples. At that time, I had never played with long pimples, but I had seen many times how a master of sports played with this racket. And I generally understood what opportunities this racket gives in technical terms and in terms of playing style. I played with this racket against an attacking opponent and got a lot of pleasure. Despondency and disappointment were overcome. Since then, I have been playing with long pimples or medium pimples, or anti-spin, and 1 smooth coating. And I have never been bored during tennis again. Thus, we come to the first reason why pimples are needed in table tennis, because they are interesting to play with. More interesting than with 2 smooth coatings. But of course, not for everyone, but for some players. People have different tastes. Furthermore, at the very lowest amateur level of the game, it happens that if a player takes long pimples, he begins to win more often against opponents with smooth coatings. At the lowest level of the game, long pimples with a sponge give an advantage because it is easy to poke with them, and opponents do not know how to play against such balls. Some players are critical of such situations. Like, if someone cannot play with smooth coatings and glues pimples, it is shameful. Well, I say differently. Glue on more pimples and throw unpleasant balls at smooth-coated players. And may the force be with you. A player wants to win more often, right now, and preferably yesterday. And so he puts pimples on his racket. This is normal. And there are also cases when a person trains with a coach, trains, and the game does not go well for him. Or he shows a tendency to undercut and play half defensively. He puts on long pimples, tries to play, and he starts to do better than with 2 smooth coatings. It could be due to some peculiarities of a person's character, their playing preferences, or some physical features that prevent them from playing successfully with pips in rubber on both sides but do not hinder successful play with long pimples. Some people cannot perform a topspin with their left hand. They try, but fail, or they simply are lazy. Or they do not like doing it and instead prefer to perform counter drives and blocks. Then the person replaces the pips in rubber with short pimples on one side and starts to frequently attack with counter drives, aggressively block with pimples, causing opponents to make mistakes on certain balls. This is also an attacking style of play, similar to using pips in rubber. There are fewer topspins and more flat shots. The rhythm of the game is usually fast at the table. Some balls become unpleasant, causing errors for opponents. By the way, if you are not currently at the World Championship for playing with pimples, please like this video. Preferably right now. It is also possible to consider the idea of using short pimples on the right and pips in rubber on the left. Yes, such deviations exist, and they can be effective. Perhaps you want to make it easier to receive spins on the right, or you want to add resistance to your shots. Or you often play counter drives on the forehand and make few topspins. This is normal, and you can play like this. Short pimples on the right or on the left is a matter of preference. Although, of course, players with pips in rubber may be dissatisfied. It is also possible to use short pimples on both sides and boldly attack with counter drives, and execute counter drives with short movements against topspins. This is a rare deviation, but the fact is that it is possible to play even at the level of a master of sport like this. Look at how Maxim Sharepnin plays. He uses pimples on both sides and a blade optimized for playing with short pimples. Some people ask why pimples are needed, and others ask why pips in rubber is needed. Thus, it can be said that playing with pimples is effective, of course, if you have spent a lot of time training and have learned to play with them. I mean both the technique and the competent use of pimples. If you do not like short pimples, you can use medium ones and play with them just as aggressively as with short ones. Or less aggressively, but with greater resistance. Medium pimples can differ greatly from each other, but if to generalize, compared to short pimples, they allow you to slightly shift the emphasis of the game from a power style to tactics. In other words, we reduce the number of powerful shots and slightly increase the number of slower balls of various kinds with increased resistance. If you want to slow down the game even more, you can play in a defensive style with long pimples on the rubber. By defensive, I mean the following. You usually give the initiative, that is, play as the second player. Your opponent attacks much more often than you. And you either stand at the table and make blocks, counter drives and single topspins, or step away from the table and perform chops against topspins, or unpleasantly push them away, or flatly counter the topspin. In the community, this is called being a defender, but in fact, you perform both attacking and defensive actions, with a predominance of defensive actions. And now look at this player, he plays with long pimples on the rubber. I think there is no need to comment on this, it is enough to see how he uses his long red pimples. Well, tell me, isn't it fascinating? A splendid example of using pimples. And another example of the game. A high-skilled player with long pimples without sponge. By the way, like this video if you haven't already. And finally, I will say a few more words about another reason to use long pimples. Some people like to disrupt the game of their opponents. That is, some players like to run and wave topspins, while others like to stand and block these runners with pimples, throw them off with unpleasant balls, and enjoy the fact that the opponent falls apart and curses dissatisfiedly. Yes, guys, there are such people, and it's good that we are not all the same, coming off the assembly line, running around and copying Ma Long. Disrupting the game of opponents with skillful use of pimples is fun. And there's no need to say that it's primitive, or that it's easy. It's as easy as giving a bear a manicure. You need to be able to use pips in rubbers, mess with pimples, play the balalaika, and fly a plane. In other words, you need to learn much more than when playing with 2 pips in rubbers. It's not like drinking an energy drink and running to shut down everyone's by topspins with a $500 racket. In conclusion, I want to say that everyone plays and competes as they can and as they like. Tennis should bring pleasure. So, boldly try playing with pimples, and you may find that it's more interesting for you than playing with 2 pips in rubbers. And come to our store for shopping more often.